The ocean had always been my solace, a vast, blue canvas where gravity surrendered its hold and the mundane dissolved into an ethereal ballet of light and shadow. Below the surface, the world was a hushed sanctuary, a place where I felt most truly myself. I craved that thrill, the silent roar of the current, the challenge of mastering its depths. It mirrored a part of my own spirit, restless and drawn to intensity. While my heart had known attachments, it was often the quiet strength and nuanced beauty of women that truly resonated with me, a preference that had deepened with each passing year. My friend, Maya, knowing my passion and my current quest for a new diving challenge, had practically insisted. "You have to meet Nora," she'd said, her voice brimming with certainty. "She's brilliant, patient, best instructor I've ever had." The dive center, a sun-bleached structure near the docks, hummed with the familiar scent of salt, neoprene, and possibility. I was early, soaking in the anticipation, when the glass door swung open. A woman entered, her movement fluid and unhurried. This was Nora. My gaze settled on her, and something shifted within me, a subtle internal recalibration. She was everything Maya had hinted at and more. Her hair, the color of rich earth, was pulled back in a neat bun, framing a face that held a quiet radiance. Her eyes, a striking shade of deep hazel, possessed a gentle depth, reflecting a serene composure that seemed to greet the world with understated grace. There was a delicate curve to her lips that hinted at a reserved kindness, and her presence, though unassuming, commanded a quiet attention. She moved with an effortless elegance, her tall, slender frame perfectly suited for the aquatic world she inhabited. She wore a simple rash guard and shorts, yet the way she carried herself, the quiet confidence in her posture, made her appear utterly captivating. She was quite simply sculpted to my aesthetic. "Brooke." Her voice was soft, melodic, cutting through my silent observation. I straightened, feeling a sudden, unexpected flush. "Yes, that's me. You must be Nora." Her smile, a genuine, understated lift of her lips, was disarming. "Welcome. I'm glad you're here." We spoke briefly about my experience, her teaching philosophy, the structure of the upcoming lessons. Her words were clear, professional, yet imbued with a genuine enthusiasm for the ocean that resonated deeply within me. She was everything I had hoped for in an instructor, and unsettlingly, everything I hadn't realized I was looking for in a person. Then she mentioned it, almost as an aside, a casual detail woven into a sentence about weekend dive spots. "My boyfriend and I explored that reef last month. It was breathtaking." The words landed with the sudden, sharp impact of a stone hitting the bottom of a deep well. The warmth that had been steadily expanding in my chest contracted abruptly, leaving a hollow ache. The vibrant colors of my immediate future, painted so vividly a moment ago, faded to a muted gray. A boyfriend. Of course. Why wouldn't someone like her be taken? The realization brought a surprising wave of heartbreak, a disappointment far more profound than any casual attraction should warrant. Yet, even as the initial pain settled, another thought began to stir, quiet and insistent, deep within me. It was a wicked idea, truly, a defiant flicker against the common sense screaming for retreat. It was unconscionable, illogical, but the certainty that had just bloomed, the profound sense of connection I felt toward her, refused to be extinguished. It wasn't about ownership or a game. It was an undeniable, magnetic pull, a feeling that this gentle, captivating woman held a secret depth I needed to explore, even if it meant navigating treacherous, uncharted waters. The thought, unbidden and compelling, was simply, I had to know her, truly know her, regardless of the path she believed she was on. Our first diving lessons commenced the following morning. The initial awkwardness from my internal turmoil dissipated as Nora, with her inherent professionalism, steered our interactions firmly towards the technicalities of buoyancy, finning techniques, and equipment checks. She was an exceptional instructor. Her explanations were precise, her demonstrations clear and graceful, translating complex maneuvers into fluid, understandable movements. Her voice, calm and steady through the calms, guided me through the initial anxiety of descent, replacing it with a quiet confidence. Underwater, the world belonged to us, a silent realm of vibrant life and hushed understanding. It was here, in this weightless expanse, that our physical proximity became a natural, almost inevitable part of the learning process. Nora would drift close to adjust my fin angle, her hand light but firm on my wrist to guide me into the right position, or steady my elbow as I practiced navigating a coral outcrop. Each adjustment was deliberate, focused on technique, with no excess warmth beyond what was necessary for instruction. I was keenly aware of her presence, the quiet strength in her movements, the serene focus in her eyes behind the mask. And I noticed, when we surfaced after particularly detailed drills, a faint color would rise high on Nora's cheekbones, visible beneath the edge of her mask. Her gaze, usually so direct and composed, would shift briefly to the water before meeting mine again, calm and focused. These tiny tells, subtle as they were, spoke volumes to my observant eye, hinting at a sensitivity beneath her professional exterior, a soft ripple of awareness. Our conversations on the boat, between dives, remained primarily technical, focused on the intricacies of the reef or the specifics of marine life. Yet even within these professional boundaries, a nascent rapport began to form. I found myself asking questions beyond the scope of instruction, queries about her favorite dive spots, the challenges of coral conservation, anything that encouraged her to share her passion more fully. Nora, in turn, would respond with an earnestness that was captivating, her gentle features animated by a quiet enthusiasm as she described a recent encounter with a school of parrotfish, or the effort to protect a fragile seagrass bed. I absorbed every detail, every nuanced inflection in her voice, every fleeting expression. The professional veneer was still firmly in place, but beneath it, I sensed a delicate, unspoken current beginning to flow between us, drawn closer by shared reverence for the ocean, rather than anything more. As the lessons progressed, our dives ventured into deeper, more intricate sections of the reef. The focus gradually shifted from fundamental techniques to advanced navigation and exploration, allowing for more unstructured interaction beneath the waves. It was in these shared explorations that I began to see Nora beyond the meticulous instructor. I observed her quiet moments of awe as a school of barracuda shimmered past, her patient grace as she pointed out a camouflaged scorpionfish, her innate comfort in this alien world. She moved with an intuitive understanding of the ocean, a connection that felt almost spiritual. One particularly challenging dive involved navigating a narrow, submerged cavern. As we moved through the confined space, my equipment snagged briefly on a sharp outcropping. A sudden, cold surge of unease, however minor, passed through me. Nora, who was leading, immediately sensed my hesitation. She turned, her hazel eyes meeting mine through the masks, radiating calm reassurance. With a steady hand, she gently freed my hose, her presence a solid anchor in the murky water. The brief moment of vulnerability for me, and her quiet, expert resolution, forged a deeper, unspoken trust between us, a reliance on each other that went beyond the instructor-student dynamic. Back on the boat, as we shed our gear and the sun warmed our skin, our conversations began to subtly widen their scope. I steered our post-dive discussions away from just technique, delving into broader questions about the ocean's health, the threat of ocean acidification, the quiet solitude of deep diving, the profound beauty she encountered daily. I listened intently as she spoke of the fragile ecosystems, her voice imbued with a soft passion as she explained how local divers were working to restore a damaged reef. I started sharing snippets of my own life, not in an overt attempt to pry, but to create a space for reciprocity. I spoke of my travels to remote coastal towns, my fascination with kiteboarding, the quiet satisfaction of mastering a new skill like underwater photography. Nora, while engaging, maintained a thoughtful reserve. Her responses were always considered, articulate, but often stopped short of revealing too much personal detail. When a conversation ventured even slightly into territory that might be considered intimate, there was a subtle shift in her demeanor, a momentary pause, a slight widening of her eyes, a careful choice of words. It wasn't evasiveness, but rather a quiet, almost unconscious guarding of her inner world. I recognized it as a boundary, one she had clearly established for herself. There was a quiet strength in her, certainly, but also a discernible privacy she held close. I respected it, even as my curiosity, now tinged with a deeper sense of empathy, yearned to understand the layers beneath her composed exterior. The connection between us was undeniable, a subtle thread woven through our shared love of the ocean, but it was still a connection carefully contained within the unspoken rules of our roles. As our training reached its final stages, the subtle shifts in Nora's demeanor became more pronounced, though still fleeting. The professional composure that had initially defined her began to show hairline fractures. A lingering gaze, a fraction of a second longer than strictly necessary, would occasionally hold mine. Her smiles, while still gentle, sometimes carried an unexpected warmth, a softness that seemed to radiate from deeper within. I observed her during these moments, a slight, almost imperceptible shake in her hand as she passed me a water bottle, a momentary pause before she looked away, as if organizing her thoughts, her hazel eyes reflecting a flicker of something unreadable. I sensed an unfamiliar sensation stirring within her, a ripple disturbing the calm surface of her self-possession. My approach remained patient, unwavering. I continued to focus on genuine connection, not through overt gestures, but through my quiet presence and attentive observation. I listened not just to her words, but to the unspoken nuances in her voice, the stories told by her expressions. I remembered small details she'd casually mentioned, a favorite marine creature, the way she preferred her wetsuit adjusted, and referenced them in passing, letting her know I'd been listening. During our dives, my gaze held a consistent intensity that communicated deep interest and respect, a silent invitation to something more profound than an instructor-student relationship. I offered quiet affirmation for her insights, acknowledging her expertise with genuine admiration. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible allure, built on genuine appreciation and a steadfast desire to truly see her. One afternoon, after a particularly long and exhilarating dive, we sat on the warm sand of a secluded cove, watching the waves unfurl and retreat. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and violet, casting a serene glow over the water. I spoke, almost to myself, about the profound sense of freedom I found in the ocean's vastness, the way it stripped away pretense and brought an unadulterated clarity. Nora, surprisingly, echoed my sentiment, her voice imbued with an unexpected wistfulness. "It's like a reset," she murmured, gazing out at the horizon. "Everything else just fades away." This shared understanding, unspoken yet palpable, created a powerful emotional resonance between us. In that moment, the barriers seemed to thin, and a profound sense of connection solidified. Afterward, I observed Nora's growing internal conflict more acutely. There were moments of quiet contemplation from her, a slight furrow in her brow as she stared out at the sea, a distant, pensive look in her eyes. She would often trail off mid-sentence, her thoughts seemingly drifting inward. It was clear she was processing something significant, something that brought a quiet disquiet to her usually serene demeanor. I understood this was the initial discomfort, the first subtle tremor, of confronting feelings that might challenge her established life, a life I knew included a boyfriend. The currents were shifting, and Nora, I sensed, was beginning to feel their pull. Our final, most challenging dive together approached, a deep exploration of an intricate, labyrinthine reef system known for its powerful, unpredictable currents. It demanded precise teamwork, unwavering focus, and absolute trust in one another. As we descended into the deeper cobalt, the light softened, the silence grew more profound. I felt a surge of adrenaline, but also an anchoring sense of Nora's steady presence beside me. Midway through, As we navigated a particularly tricky pass, a strong, unexpected current swirled around us, pushing me slightly off course. For a fleeting moment, disorientation took hold, the vastness of the water suddenly feeling less like freedom and more like an engulfing force. Before panic could fully set in, Nora was there. Her hand, firm and reassuring, found my arm, a silent anchor in the swirling water. She gently, decisively, guided me back into the calmer channel, her hazel eyes meeting mine through her mask, conveying a quiet strength that instantly settled my racing heart. It was a brief, intense moment, but it solidified an unspoken bond, a profound reliance on each other's competence and trust that transcended the physical. Back on the boat, as we shed our heavy gear, the lingering intensity of the dive seemed to prompt a more personal conversation. The experience had chipped away at the last vestiges of our professional distance. Nora, uncharacteristically, cleared her throat. "That current, it reminded me of a dive I had a few years ago," she began, her voice softer than usual. "It was during my instructor training. A really difficult situation. Felt like I was losing control. For a while after, I almost stopped diving altogether." Her voice wavered slightly at the end, a rare glimpse into a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. I listened intently, my gaze steady on her. I didn't offer platitudes. Instead, I simply nodded, communicating my presence, my understanding. "That sounds incredibly isolating," I said quietly, acknowledging the unspoken fear she must have carried. To feel that loss of control in a place you usually find so much peace. My words were not about fixing, but about truly seeing her, recognizing the depth of her past struggle. Nora looked at me, her eyes a complex mix of surprise and relief. She continued to speak, sharing more about the lingering impact of that experience, the quiet struggle she'd had to regain her confidence, how she'd practiced in shallow waters for months before daring to dive deep again. My response was genuine empathy, offered not with grand gestures, but with my steady presence and understanding gaze. I offered a perspective that centered on the resilience required to overcome such fears, a quiet affirmation of her strength. I communicated a depth of acceptance that gently, almost imperceptibly, challenged Nora's carefully constructed walls. In that moment, a quiet space of profound safety seemed to form between us. I sensed Nora's defenses subtly beginning to crack, revealing a softer, more exposed layer beneath. There was a palpable shift in our dynamic, a quiet acknowledgement of the intimacy growing between us, an intimacy that felt emotionally profound and unexpectedly resonant for Nora, a connection she hadn't anticipated and, I suspected, hadn't quite known she needed. The current between us had definitely shifted, irrevocably. The day of our final dive had come. We had pushed our limits, explored new territories, and the training was complete. As the boat brought us back to shore, the usual post-dive chatter felt subdued, replaced by a tangible quietness between Nora and me. The air itself seemed charged, crackling with unspoken emotions, with the weight of everything that had passed between us, and everything yet unsaid. We sat by the water's edge long after the other divers had dispersed, the setting sun painting the sea in hues of molten gold and bruised purple. The gentle lapping of the waves against the sand was the only sound, a soft rhythm against the insistent beat of my own heart. My gaze, steady and unwavering, settled on Nora. It was filled with a quiet intensity, an invitation to absolute vulnerability, to shed the last of her carefully constructed defenses. Nora avoided my gaze for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon, as if searching for an answer there. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, a subtle manifestation of the internal struggle I knew she was enduring. Then, slowly, almost reluctantly, she turned her head and met my eyes. Her own hazel depths reflected a tumultuous mix of confusion, longing, a dawning understanding, and a flicker of fear. I did not speak. My presence alone, I hoped, was a profound enough invitation. I subtly shifted closer, the bare skin of my arm almost brushing hers, the small distance between us now feeling immense, yet also achingly finite. The silence stretched, thick with anticipation, heavy with the weight of unexpressed feelings that vibrated between us like a taut string. Every beat of my heart felt magnified, echoing the quiet desperation and profound hope that surged within me. I watched Nora's face, her subtle pauses, the slight parting of her lips as if to speak, then closing again. After what felt like an eternity, a moment of profound internal struggle etched on her delicate features, Nora made a subtle movement. A slight, almost imperceptible turn towards me, a barely discernible lean, a silent, reciprocal pull that mirrored the magnetic force I had felt from our very first encounter. Sensing this delicate opening, this fragile invitation, I gently, slowly, closed the small distance between us. My hand, without conscious thought, lifted and cupped her jaw, my thumb resting softly on her skin. Our lips met in a soft, tentative kiss, quiet, like the hush of waves at dusk, a release of all the unspoken understanding between us. It was a kiss filled with the weight of everything unsaid, every shared glance, every moment of quiet trust, every instance of unspoken understanding that had grown between us in the deep. It was not demanding, but rather a quiet, profound release, a testament to Nora's acceptance of a feeling she could no longer deny, a feeling that had fought its way to the surface against all odds. It was a fragile beginning, a tentative step onto uncharted land, rather than a definitive end. The taste of salt and something entirely new mingled on my tongue, a taste of forbidden truth and a quiet, blossoming hope. The kiss, soft and unexpected, hung in the air between us, a silent question and a profound, wordless answer. Nora pulled back slightly, her eyes wide, a kaleidoscope of emotions swirling within their hazel depths, shock, wonder, fear, and beneath it all, a quiet, almost bewildered sense of rightness. I remained still, my hand still gently cupping her jaw for a moment longer, my gaze steady and reassuring. I offered a silent anchor, a silent promise of unwavering presence. Then, Nora broke eye contact, her hand lifting to her lips, a gesture that spoke volumes of her stunned realization. She rose abruptly, a quiet shiver running through her frame, and walked away from the water's edge, retreating into the deepening twilight. I understood. This was not rejection, but Nora's necessary journey into the tumultuous waters of her own heart, a confrontation with the unexpected torrent of feelings that had just broken through her carefully constructed world. I watched her go, resisting the urge to follow, to push. She needed space, time to navigate the bewildering landscape of her past choices and the profound implications of this new, unexpected connection. I offered her that space, along with my quiet understanding. The days that followed were a silent testament to Nora's internal struggle. The phone calls, once consistent for lessons, ceased. I saw her at the dive center a few times, her demeanor more reserved than usual, her gaze often distant, lost in thought. She avoided my eyes, but I noticed her subtle shifts, the way her hand would sometimes hover near her lips, the same spot where ours had met. I knew she was grappling, wrestling with the confusion of her current relationship and the overwhelming, undeniable feelings that had been awakened within her. Then the hesitant messages began. First brief, almost formal, about returning a piece of dive equipment I'd left behind, then subtly shifting to inquiries about my next dive plans, and finally, a more vulnerable text. Can we talk? Really talk. We met at a quiet coffee shop, away from the dive center. Nora looked pale, her usual serene composure replaced by a visible weariness. She began to speak, her voice soft but resolute, her words a halting, courageous unveiling of her heart. She spoke of her boyfriend, of a relationship built on comfort and expectation, rather than a deeper, soul-stirring connection. She confessed her bewilderment at the powerful pull she felt towards me, a feeling that had completely blindsided her. Her eyes, as they finally met mine, were filled with a raw vulnerability I hadn't seen before. I don't "I don't understand any of it," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "But I can't stop thinking about that moment. About you." I listened, truly listened, offering only gentle prompts and my unwavering presence. I didn't minimize her confusion or the difficulty of her situation. Instead, I offered a safe harbor for her vulnerability. "It's all right not to understand everything at once, Nora," I told her, my voice low and steady. "Sometimes, the most profound connections are the ones we least expect, the ones that challenge everything we thought we knew." Through my patient listening, my gentle understanding, Nora began to find solace. She processed her past, not as a series of mistakes, but as a journey that had, however circuitously, led her to this point of profound self-discovery. She talked about the quiet compromises she had made, the way she'd set aside her love for deep-sea exploration to join her boyfriend on casual beach trips, the parts of herself she had unknowingly suppressed. The connection with me, the undeniable warmth and acceptance I offered, acted as a catalyst for healing, allowing Nora to accept and embrace a more authentic, truer version of herself, one that was finally surfacing for air. Her journey towards vulnerability was arduous, but in the shelter of our shared, unspoken bond, she was slowly, courageously, beginning to heal. Nora's journey towards embracing her truth was not immediate, nor was it without its trials. The weeks that followed were marked by difficult, necessary choices. She confronted her existing relationship, a conversation that was undoubtedly painful but vital for her to align her life with her newfound understanding. I remained a quiet pillar of support throughout this challenging period, offering a steady presence without pressure and unwavering belief in her strength. I respected her need to navigate these profound personal shifts independently, understanding that her healing and growth were hers alone to claim. Once the dust began to settle, once Nora had taken the brave steps to disentangle her life, our relationship began in earnest. It was a delicate, evolving dance. We learned to communicate openly, navigating the complexities that arose from Nora's recent past and the subtle, sometimes overt, societal pressures that often accompany same-sex relationships. There were moments of doubt, of fear, but we faced them together, our bond strengthening with each hurdle overcome. Nora, for the first time, spoke of her past with a clarity that indicated true acceptance, not regret. She shared the quiet loneliness she had carried, the feeling of something essential missing from her life that she now realized was the authentic connection we had found. On weekends, we'd head out at dawn, our gear packed side by side, talking through our dive plan as the boat cut through the water. Nora would point out a cluster of angelfish she'd spotted on a previous trip, her eyes lighting up as she described their patterns, and I'd listen, grateful for the way she shared this world with me. After dives, we'd sit on the boat's deck, sipping warm tea, and talk about nothing and everything, her plans to start a small marine conservation workshop, my next travel project, and in those moments, the quiet between us felt like a promise, steady and true. Brooke and Nora continued to grow, both individually and as a couple. I learned the depth of patience, the profound reward of a connection forged through vulnerability, and the immense joy of witnessing someone truly come into their own. Nora, in turn, blossomed. She embraced her true self, shedding the quiet reservations that had once defined her. Her gentle nature remained, but it was now imbued with a quiet confidence, a serene strength born from self-acceptance. She found solace not just in the deep blue ocean, but in the uncharted depths of our shared affection, healing from years of living a life that wasn't entirely her own. Her laughter, once reserved, became more frequent, more resonant, echoing her inner liberation. Our story did not conclude with a definitive, fairy tale ending, but rather opened onto a vast, inviting horizon. We continued to explore both the breathtaking underwater worlds we loved and the ever-deepening currents of our hearts. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic declarations, only the quiet, steadfast commitment of two souls who had found their way to each other against the current. Our love was an ongoing journey, filled with the promise of continued exploration, of shared challenges, and of a bond that deepened with each passing day. It was a testament to a love that found its way against all expectations, a love that continued to evolve, vibrant and alive, beneath the vast, open sky.